Good morning, friends. My name is Jake. This is Returning Retro, and I'm happy you're here with me today because I have an excellent conversation in store for you. So, I've noticed as I've started along my Returning Retro adventure that the players in the space so far approach the solutions they are creating for us suffering, whether it's tech addiction, smartphone addiction, social media addiction, or even just want less noise and to digitally declutter different areas of their life. They'll tend to approach it from either a software approach, a hardware approach, or both at the same time. And you'll find on the channel there are examples of all of those. Today, we're going to talk to Jonathan from notasmartphone.com, who has created what is called PauseOS. And a couple of little housekeeping items at the beginning here. We've been trying to get this conversation to happen for weeks now, and we both had some time. He was not set up for it. He didn't even have a camera, so we just made the best with what we had, just so that we could get the information out there to the viewers and listeners. So yeah, it was my pleasure talking with Jonathan. So without further delay, we'll jump right into it. I think that we can let the conversation flow a little bit. So Jonathan, thank you for joining me on Returning Retro. I know that for listeners or viewers, we've been trying to coordinate this for several weeks, and it hasn't worked out until this very moment. And even then, it almost didn't work out now, because you definitely practice what you preach in avoiding distractions, including locking down your tech. So maybe tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about yourself, Jonathan from, I don't know if I should call you Jonathan from PauseOS, if I should call you Jonathan from notasmartphone.com. But yeah, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. I came across your YouTube channel, and it just really represented the things that I've kind of been working on and the sort of lifestyle that I've been really pushing forwards to create for myself, which is really just a distraction-free environment when it comes to technology. You know, I think everyone pretty much uses their phone and other technology on the internet too much. I think there's just people who admit that they do too much, and then there's others that don't. But my name's Jonathan, and man, I've had a podcast called Minimalist Tech for like years, where I've talked about this concept of...
I did not even know about that part of things, Jonathan. I had not. Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. I had seen the videos that you had recorded on your YouTube and naturally your website, which I'm sure we'll get to that. But okay, continue. Sorry, I hadn't known about that.
Yeah, no, it's just been a long-term journey for me of exploring these concepts of like minimalism and slow living, and just doing experiments of, you know, trying to not have home internet, for example. And, you know, so the podcast was just a way for me to ramble about those experiments that I've done over the years. Okay. And, but the last few years, I really sort of focused in on, and we'll talk about this in detail, is that I tried distraction-free phones. I tried to buy a dumb phone, basically. And I didn't have the success I was hoping for. A lot of the phones in the United States that are like flip phone-y type of phones, they still have Facebook, they still have YouTube, they still have like open web browsers and things. I didn't want that. I've tried other projects that that I want to support and throw love towards, like the Light Phone project, for example. I've tried that as well, and those solutions just didn't work for me. I really like modern smartphone hardware. You know, we've come a long way when it comes to that type of technology from a hardware perspective and from a user interface perspective. But I just think having too many apps, like an open app store, an open web browser, things like that, just create a situation where these devices can be overwhelming for some people. And I'm one of those people. And so I dove into the technology of figuring out how to build custom Android open source operating systems using something called AOSP and also projects like LineageOS, where I could build the operating system of my dreams, which was a modern feeling operating system that just didn't have any of those distracting things like the App Store and the web browser, and no food delivery apps was another big thing for me. So in terms of the name of the business, I've bought a bunch of domain names and I'm putting this together. So I do have PauseOS.com, but I also have notasmartphone.com. I have notadumbphone.com and some other ones.
Both sides of it, yeah.
So sort of putting that side together.
Okay. And how, so for the sake of the conversation, I'm just going to call what you are working on PauseOS, this alternative Android-based or AOSP-based operating system. How long have you been doing this? I mean, I don't know how long you've had the website up, but how long have you been creating or using, I guess you could say, the current or the most recent iteration of this operating system that you've made? How new is this project itself?
So this actually goes back to like 10 something years ago.
Oh, wow.
When
okay.
I was I had a dumb phone. I was happy with it. And then I had a girlfriend who thought it was stupid that I had a dumb phone, so she bought me a smartphone. Bless her soul. Okay,
that's awesome. Well, could have been. I mean, that's
it was
very,
nice
very,
intention,
very generous. Yeah.
But I've always kind of had this like back and forth with like not. I love tech, but I just don't want all of it all the time. And so I figured out with the old Pixel device. This was like, I can't even remember the name of the Pixel. I figured out that I could put alternative operating systems on there. And back then there was something called CyanogenMod. And so, yeah, it was exciting at the time. I've just been a tech nerd for a long time. So like just kind of experimenting with that was fun. But what I did with that was I installed it and then I used another program. There was like a rooted thing to delete the web browser and delete the stuff I didn't want on there. But it wasn't really a long-term fix. Like I could still easily get that stuff back on there, or just factory reset the phone and it goes back to normal and all that kind of stuff. So and at that time I didn't have the technical ability to build an operating system from source code like that. This is like a different thing. So I became a web developer, software developer, did a bunch of tech IT stuff over the years, and accumulated the knowledge to build a project using AOSP and also using LineageOS, kind of experimenting back and forth between the two, and to actually craft an operating system where it's not like you install something and then you have to make modifications to it. It's just the operating system is distraction free from the ground up. Right.
Okay. So let me ask you a couple follow-up questions for folks that maybe aren't familiar with all of this different versions of Android, AOSP. Maybe walk us through what is different between, let's just say, Android and LineageOS as maybe a step one, and then what's even further different between LineageOS and PauseOS, this one that you have created after, it sounds like, what started maybe as a hobby, you then went and actually got the training to learn the actual engineering side of things, software development, coding side of things, that has led you to PauseOS as one step further removed from not only Android but Lineage and so on.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I sort of approach this more from a technical side. So one of the things I'm generally like open to looking for is like perhaps a more like a partner or someone that's more on the marketing sort of human side of this. So this will be interesting, maybe more towards like the people that have the tech nerdiness, but I don't want to, make them fall asleep too much on this side of thing. But essentially, AOSP, which just stands for Android Open Source Project, is the basis for what people think of as Android. So if you buy a phone that's like a quote-unquote Android phone or like from Samsung or something, what it actually has on it is this open source Android project, which is sort of people can use to build whatever operating system they want. Okay, and so, but what Google does and what Samsung does is they put their custom applications that they've built on top of AOSP, and that's what you get, right? And so Samsung skins things a little bit different than, Google, and, there's other companies, and they sort of add a little different look and feel. So depending on which device you have, the hardware is slightly different in different ways, but also the look and feel. And also some of the applications that are installed by default are different. Like back in the day, it was kind of, you got like a Sprint phone, you would have these there was like a NASCAR app, and there was like, some TV apps on there that, some people might consider bloatware to some degree. And so there's projects like CalyxOS or LineageOS and things that sort of take AOSP and sort of build their own sort of spin on it, sort of add on to it in their own way that's more focused on an open source a way of doing things. And so you can either start with an AOSP as a raw base, which a lot of companies do, like the Light phone, for example, is essentially like AOSP with their own like launcher and that sort of thing on top.
So that's like the very base, right? If I'm understanding, AOSP is like if you like, that's like the foundation that if you went below that, you would basically be starting from scratch, right? Whereas AOSP is sort of the base layer that, like you had mentioned, CalyxOS, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Graphene, obviously
Yes.
LineageOS, will then take the Android open source project base layer, and then they will go from there and do their own custom tweaks and things. But you're saying, and if I understand where you're maybe going with this, some people will take one of these existing projects that they've already done a lot of the legwork and kind of go from there.
Correct.
Instead of just starting with that base AOSP, they'll sort of leverage what's already out there in one of these open source projects.
Yeah, and so you can kind of do different things with that, and there's maybe reasons why you might choose one direction or the other. I'm kind of open to, either direction. I think I had that sort of affinity for, what Lineage had been before, and so I kind of,
A little nostalgia.
Yeah, a little nostalgia
little
there. And so yeah, there's I don't know. There's a lot of differences that we can maybe discuss a little bit in terms of those things, but that covers the sort of basis of it. And I think that what we're starting to see is different creators having sort of a different vision of what's important about a smartphone, right? Like some people are uber concerned about security. Some people really don't want to have any Google applications or anything that connects to Google servers on them. My focus is really
like super privacy focused. That
Yes.
don't want they don't want anything going back to the mothership of Google.
Correct. Some want to put their own launcher on there. Some of them allow you to get back to to be able to sideload applications. Some do not. And so my philosophy was that I wanted it to be, number one, distraction free. That was the key piece of it. And then also including things like, one of the things I consider distracting is like food delivery apps. I don't want to have as beautiful and amazing as DoorDash and Uber Eats and all these things are, I tend to spend more money than I need to. And it's just like, I just don't want that stuff on my phone.
Sure.
And so that was key for me also. And then I had a real big affinity for Blackberries and Palm Pilots.
Right.
So even when I was using these dumb phones, I started to buy old Palm Pilots. I literally went back and bought from the oldest one I could get was the Palm 3E or something like that. And then the Palm V, and then the Palm VX. My favorite was the Palm Tungsten C, which had a little keyboard on it.
Okay.
And, went through that process of having an old computer and docking it and kind of seeing how the evolution of the smartphone going back to really where a lot of this was started, which was Palm and BlackBerry and so these other companies. And surprisingly, there's a lot of similarity and still there's a lot of utility in these old devices. They're still great for having organizing your contacts, your calendar, having a calculator, having a notes application. A lot of the basis of the modern smartphone is still there in these old devices. And
Sure.
I would love to use these old devices, but they just either they don't work on the modern networks, right? Or the hardware is just literally 20 years old at this point, and it's just starting to break down, unfortunately. I'm a tech guy. I love to try to keep things working, but I'd much rather have something that's on modern hardware and something where I can carry just one device, and it adds that productivity that we felt from like old Blackberries and old Palm Pilots. And so that's the sort of next phase of and part of like what I have envisioned for this PauseOS system.
Okay. And that's interesting. And I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't really talked to you about that aspect of it yet. But I've noticed that in the intentional tech world or the intentional tech segment, you've got a number of different approaches that people will take. One of which is, it sounds like kind of the opposite of what you're describing there, in that they will decentralize. So they'll kind of go back to the way, I mean, for me at least in middle school and high school, there wasn't really a do-it-all device at that point. You had either a CD player or MP3 players. iPods had come onto the scene by that point. So you had that, but then you also had your phone, which was a separate device. Then you also had, at that point, if you wanted any kind of decent picture quality, you had to have a portable camera. So you had a number of different devices that you would use by necessity. I've seen some people in intentional tech going back that direction, where they're diversifying, they're decentralizing, so that they have all of these different things that they carry around with them all at once. Sounds like with PauseOS, you're kind of trying to go a little bit of a best of both worlds, where you can still have a centralized solution in your smartphone, just without being necessarily prone to all of the distractions. And again, interestingly, you mentioned the food delivery apps, not just attention distraction, but maybe even like financial or like wallet distractions as well.
Absolutely. They're like, people, if just having this magical device that we have with us all the time, everywhere we go, if you have that boredom, you just use it in different ways, just like whether it's taking your time as a resource or just additional money that you spending that you otherwise just would not. And so there is sort of a balance there. I love, there was like an old video that showed an old school desk, and it had like all the things like a physical calendar and then your calculator, and like all these things used to be separate. Your notepad was physical and everything. And all it's over time, these things have all sort of slowly disappeared and then moved into like these singular devices that we have. And I think that there is almost sort of like a balance with it. Like, I'm not trying to go fully decentralized or fully centralized. It's just finding that nice middle ground. So for example, there's no way to watch movies basically on this phone, right? Unless you were to like buy an MP or an MP4 or something like that of a movie and then transfer it physically to the device.
Right.
But I love movies. And what I did was I made a shelf and I started watching Blu-ray movies, like, because I went down the path of like buying these digital movies and these digital codes. And even as a gamer, like I saw, you have the Game Gear in the background, which I love. Like with the Xbox 360, I started buying digital games. And over time, I realized, like, I've spent all this money. I have nothing to show for it. And I have these huge back catalogs of this content that I just don't even have time to consume, right? Because, you get things on sale, that sort of thing. So I think the intentionality of consumption is what this sort of PauseOS enables, right? Like, if I want to watch a movie, I have to think about, like, what's important to me and purchase, like, spend money, purchase something that and there's some friction there that's created, but there's also something really fun about it. Like, it becomes this exciting thing where you find out, oh yeah, I remember this, or some of these movies might be cheap, some of them are like really like surprisingly expensive, like just because the rarity of them.
Right.
And that's fun. And there's like a one at a time, like one thing at a time kind of approach, where I like if you want to watch a movie, like, put a disc in the player and watch it. If you want to play a game, use a cartridge, as opposed to by removing all the friction like we've done with all these modern user interfaces and operating systems, it's just compounded, like, our access to everything. It's too much. It just becomes like the unfortunate reality of life is we only have a certain amount of time. It's a devastating reality. but it's better to face that as opposed to just, you could use your phone and lose all your time.
Well, and I think exactly along that same line of thought is when you have access to everything, individual things just kind of become less meaningful or even less enjoyable. I mean, for example, I've noticed this with Spotify. I mean, I've been a Spotify user for years, but I didn't used to be. I used to have to go in and whether it was, oh man, this is going to date me, the real media player, or eventually iTunes kind of became the big one on the block, and you'd have to go in and like curate your playlist with actual MP3 files that in my case I got off of actual compact discs. And so it everything, because of that process that you had to go through to consume the media that you consumed was more meaningful and more enjoyable, I would argue. Absolutely. Whereas now, when you have everything that is just all available all at once, whether it's video or audio, or in even more so now than ever before, gaming as well, when you have access to everything, nothing really means anything, or at least not to the extent that it used to. And so this is something that I think you're definitely, striking a chord for me personally. So this could be a good transition over to PauseOS itself. So let's say, for example, right now I'm in the process of collecting DVDs and CDs of stuff, whether it's a album, a TV series, a movie that's meaningful for me, and I'm making digital copies of it so that I can, if I wanted to watch it on a computer or on a phone or whatnot, throw it on an SD card or on the device itself. Will PauseOS allow me to consume media on the phone, whether it's just and again, I'm not talking about streaming stuff specifically. I'm talking about if I did have the MP4 or the MP3 version on, the Pixel that I was using PauseOS with, can I use it for that? Or is it more restrictive than even that? And you're going to say, no, Jake, go pop a disc in and watch it on your screen.
No, that's a great question. And I love you're collecting DVDs and these things because, there's so much fun with it. And I think that, to your point, it's like there's something enjoyable about having, appreciating what you have, as opposed to constantly being in this like wanting the next thing phase. Like there's a bit of a danger in that. But to answer your question very directly, you can absolutely watch your MP4s. You can absolutely listen to MP3s. I made this sort of distinction between like, the Spotify example is a great thing. Like, yes, Spotify is amazing and having access to all the songs that have ever been created, at any moment. But if you purchase, whether it's a CD and like you've done it where you burn it through iTunes or something like that, you get the MP3s that way. Or if you purchase your MP3s, because you could literally still go to the iTunes store today and buy MP3s, which is a great service.
Which I rediscovered this, Jonathan. I am not even joking. Like 2 weeks ago, I was like, because some of my favorite artists, I'm like, they're only streaming. How am I gonna? But then I was like, oh my gosh, the iTunes store. Yeah. You can still go and like so many, even the modern stuff. So anyway, sorry, not to interrupt you there, but I just barely, with joy and jubilation, rediscovered the iTunes store a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing because iTunes is or Apple is sort of hiding it somewhat because they're focused on selling you the subscription service, with Apple Music, and but it's still there, and even with Amazon you can buy MP3s that way as well. And I feel like I don't have the math on it, but I feel like I'm supporting the artist a little bit more by buying their album, because I've heard so many things about like artists streaming and they're just not really getting paid much at all, but it's this catch-22 where they have to have their music on there, otherwise they can't be discovered.
Because that's where everyone is. Yep.
Yeah, so it's like I want to feel like I'm supporting the artist, but I also love the experience of like I transferred my MP3s onto this phone, and I've actually had the experience of just sitting down, connecting via Bluetooth to my home theater system and just listening to some music on an evening. And it's something that if I had access to everything, I'd be switching around from this, that to the other. And this, I have that experience that maybe some people haven't experienced, is just like listening to a full album. I feel like there's something about that maybe it's nostalgic, but I enjoy that. I appreciate that. But you can certainly, whatever media that you have, you can throw on there. The USB-C, you just connect a USB stick directly to the phone, transfer files over, and you're good to go. Or there's even an open source app called PairDrop. This is similar to AirDrop that allows you to transfer from your computer to the phone that way. So I've used that a lot as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll try to. I'll find a link to that, include it in the show notes here, so that people can try that out as well. So, okay. Well, this is. I mean, I'm loving this discussion as you and I in our call the other day. Like, I feel like we're of a like mind in so many ways. We can just talk and talk and talk. But I do want. Oh, and one final thought to that before we move over. Something that you kind of alluded to just there was. Isn't it so interesting how nowadays we tend to let, whether you call it the technology at large, an individual website's or software's algorithm, almost determine what it is that we consume or enjoy in terms of media, as opposed to the way it used to be. We had to seek it out, find it, curate it, make either whether it was the playlist or even just a collection of albums or songs. We kind of used to, the onus used to be on the user, as opposed to now it's almost more like they want us to consume what they want us to consume. I don't know. So that's maybe getting a little conspiratorial. Not really, but
I think there's such a great point in there. I mean, it's just like, this goes all the way back to, I remember older operating systems when the internet first started coming out, to date myself, like you used to be able to delete whatever apps you wanted to from your computer. And that included the web browser. Like if you didn't want a web browser, you just didn't have to have it on the computer. Right? Like, because there were so much things that were done offline back then. You had CDs and DVDs, or I mean, I don't think DVDs yet, but CD-ROM was like the big main thing. And I felt that there was a transition where there was an update for an operating system. I think it was maybe Windows XP, where if you deleted the web browser, as soon as you restarted the computer, it would show back up. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, I don't have control over this device the way that I want to, right? They're sort of imposing their vision on me. And you could argue that, well, there's just simplicity, and maybe that there's some customers who deleted it by accident, and they didn't want to have to support those customers or something like that. But we're sort of living in the visions of a lot of these social media companies. They're all really vying for our attention, because the more that they can get us to use their platforms, the more money that they make. Even if it's a quote unquote free service, they can still extract this data that, of course, now we know they're using to train large language models. And this sort of AI is like, hey, you're in the AI somewhere. Your conversation,
or even just sell it to advertisers. I mean, there's kind of those two different sides of it. Like, they're just using our data to train their algorithms to be better at getting our data. Like, there's that whole side of it, but then also just ad dollars is still huge.
It's a huge part. And so I want to have more control over my tech, and just have more control over my time. I think that's a big part of it, because when you really move into the space of getting a distraction-free phone, and like what I've done is that, putting on a tablet and then locking down my computer, and then I've even gone to the phase of like not just having physical media, but removing Wi-Fi and internet from the gaming consoles that I have, to really like have this experience of, if I'm bored, I'm not just going to distract myself with something just to fill the time in. And it's something where I think people should try out some of these distraction-free phones, whether it's mine, whether it's the Light phone, whether it's any of these projects, like, because it could challenge you to, when you remove that potential distraction, which the phone especially can be for many people, you can have more time, just not generally, for one. Like, all of a sudden now you have all this free time where you can just do things, accomplish things. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, it gives you that free time to actually go and handle those things that you might have been overwhelmed, or, even just little stuff. Maybe you need to go mow the lawn, or you got to do the dishes or whatever. Give you some extra free space for that. But it also, the sort of deeper side to this is that it can force you to ask the question of, like, are there things that you're avoiding in your own life? Whether it's uncomfortable feelings or emotions, things that maybe you've gone through in your life, maybe some trauma that you've experienced, and it's sort of, maybe you're using some of this social media to sort of drown that emotion out and sort of escape, into that, and that's a big piece of this, where it's not just like, this is the opposite of, we're not the circus of like trying to entertain you endlessly and, just forget about everything and escape. It's like, no, you want to sort of have some space to get back to your real life, maybe to connect with maybe people that in your life that you haven't connected with. It's a really powerful thing, but it's also can be an emotionally challenging thing too, when you're forced to sit with yourself and have that time.
Well, and you've just brought up a very interesting aspect of what I, just to refer to my own adventure as returning retro, that I hadn't really ever thought about it this way before, Jonathan. But you're talking about how technology and the distractions thereof can not only keep us from the things that we otherwise could be doing, such as, like you said, like being bored and doing something creative, or going and discovering something. So it keeps us from the things that we could be doing, but man, what is it keeping it from that we should be doing? This is something that I'm going to have to chew on this for a little. This is a really interesting side of things that I hadn't really ever considered before in this way.
It gets pretty deep, and I think there's just like a sort of spectrum of how people have treated technology in their lives. Like some people are sort of passing and they're just happy with their phone that does everything, and that's totally cool. That's totally fine. But if you feel like there's like some stress that's happening, which I think a lot of people are feeling, they're feeling the sort of weight of all of this amazing technology that we have. And there are some concerns that are legitimate, and there's stress that's legitimate, and a lot of these apps they're built by very smart people who like are very close with like building gambling applications and things like this. Like, how do we get the people to use the thing more?
A lot of parallels.
Yeah, there's so many parallels, and the reason I think overall I created this was like just to give people like a relief from that stuff, I would love to offer that to people, is like, I still need a phone. I still want to be able to text easily, like I don't want to have a cumbersome thing where I have to use a T9 thing on my phone. Like, it's still a modern hardware. We've already figured out so many of the things. Like I don't have a list view for my apps because I feel like there's a reason that they look like icons, because that's what your finger looks like.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
and this is something that just so that we don't move past it, this is something, just this idea of having the options out there, because and you and I had discussed this the other day a little bit, of how everyone is going to have a slightly different approach to this, because heaven forbid every single person that has ever lived is different than every other person that ever lived. So there's obviously going to be a spectrum of people's approaches to trying to get this aspect of their lives under control, as is, or to the extent that it is needed to be brought under control. And so I think that it's cool to see the different versions. So, for example, you had said, even here is a real world example of how, we've got this, so it's so good. We don't need the T9. We don't need the keypads or whatever. My friend, my desk is dripping with keypad, as modern as I can make it, because that's the way that I really like having the tactileness, I'm not sure what the word is, but is something that is actually something very meaningful for me. Whereas the flip side of that is whether or not you or maybe someone like you, it just doesn't necessarily do anything for them, or could even be somewhat inhibitive. So I really like how it's this approach to giving people options, because again, everybody's different.
Absolutely. And I love the options. I mean, that's part of what's so exciting about this distraction-free tech that we're starting to see, is like we starting to have like cool options again. Like for so long we've been stuck with like the iPhone, and then what we know of as Android, which is kind of a copy of an iPhone in a lot of ways. It's kind of, there's differences obviously, but there's so many similarities there, and so it just felt like things were getting kind of monotonous and boring, and so having an option of some of these different different hardware and things are really fun and interesting. And I also want to say that, like, this is like a conversation. I feel like we're not at the stage where we've, anybody's sort of figured out the perfect situation for a distraction-free tech environment, but there's such a strong need for it, and we're trying to tackle this problem as best we can, and it is that conversation. So if someone was to buy a phone from me, and they said, well, actually, I would really like to have this or that, it's like, these things are not set in stone the way they are now. There's some really important things that we want to avoid. We don't want to have the addictive nature of things, the violent content, or the fast food spending, or impulse shopping. Like, we don't want to enable some of these addictive scrolling and things like that.
There's some guardrails up that it's like, okay, we're not going to go outside of the or maybe like some boundaries where you've kind of, for lack of a better analogy, drawn a bit of a line in the sand.
Yes.
Am I understand? Okay, perfect. Okay.
Absolutely. And so, but if there is like, I wish I had this app or that app, and it makes sense within that sort of structure, then we will try to get that onto the phone, And if we can't get it onto the phone because the open source nature of some of these things, then we can build an application for that. Like, there's ways around this where you can still have access to some of the things without that distraction. Like when I'm evaluating applications of like whether it can go on the phone or not, it's like it can't go out to the greater internet, right? Like, you can't be able to open the app and then click a few links and now all of a sudden you're in like some open web browser. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, it could be an amazing app with great utility, but if it has that, it just can't be on the phone, because it's sort of just,
Sure.
And that's part of the reason where like no side loading of applications is allowed, because that's why I was so upset. I love the Light Phone. I love those guys. Like, I want the best for that company. You should go buy a Light Phone 3, okay? But like, I know that I could get into the base level of Android with like a few clicks on that hardware, and I can install an app store, and now I basically have like a full open device again. It's like, I don't want that. For me, that doesn't work personally. So I wish they had locked that down more. And part of me kind of getting into the space is like, I want to challenge people. I want to like, let's do better. And also, let's work together if we can. I think there's a lot of room for collaboration. So if there is folks that do listen to this that maybe are working on a project that they feel similar in some way, like, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about this. I think that there's overlap into creating maybe sharing some applications, or there's several things that can be done even on the hardware side potentially, where we can help work this problem together. Because even when you look at Apple versus Samsung, for example, like, people think that they're competitors, but in reality, Apple buys more displays from Samsung than anyone else in like the world, I'm pretty sure. So so there's plenty of opportunity for that and collaboration. I want to be a part of the solution. That's the main thing of this, and why I'm so happy to talk to you about this.
Well, and this is something that I think, no, you're hitting the nail on the head, Jonathan. I think this is something that is very unique to, again, what the term that I just seems to make sense to me personally, this intentional tech, or distraction free, I think is another really good word for it. Space is the people that I have talked to, whether it's the team over at Sleek, whether it's the team over at SidePhone, even this very locked down version of a device, Keyphone, talking to the CEO and the director of marketing over there, they definitely want feedback. This is something that I found so unique in this space, is there's almost like this hunger by these companies that are out here making these solutions for people to know what people are looking for, because otherwise, how are they going to know how to best serve their customers? You said something just then about how I just wish that Light Phone had done this, and this, and this. I have had dozens of comments from the exact opposite. Like, look, I don't have problems with this, that, or the other thing, but because I can't sideload these two apps that I do need, I can't. So it's like people come at it from all these different angles, and I just think it's cool that it's an environment where, at least so far, the companies that I've been talking to, there is this sense of, we're kind of all in this together, so let's work together. If PauseOS doesn't work, maybe Lite does, or maybe minimal phone, where you've got open Android, but you've got the hardware limitations that kind of help people out a little bit. I don't know. It's just been really cool to see this entire, again, so far, I haven't talked obviously to every single company that's out there, but it seems like there's this desire for collaboration, figuring out what is going to best serve what I think, and I would assume you would agree, is a very underserved segment of the market.
Absolutely. It's just the more options, the better, and the more success that any of us can have in this space is going to be a beautiful thing. And then I think that the collaboration as well is something I'm super open to and excited about, because like you said, there are some different philosophies and I think different guardrails that will sort of separate some of these projects more and more as we move into the future. And then people can have their choice that, they want to use this phone, maybe even they want to have this one and this one. They just use it in different circumstances. Like I feel
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Like I feel like, even with my, this PauseOS thing, I think, someone who needs a smartphone for work, for example, like they have all these apps that they have to have and they feel like they really can't go without. It's like, well, maybe what you could do is leave your phone at your desk when you leave the office and then take the PauseOS phone home with you. And, and then you have that separation. And it's like, when you have the separation, I mean, for me, it's like a vacation. It's like you're getting a break from all the noise,
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you want to use that on nights and weekends. And so there's ways of, people can kind of try to figure this out, but people need the options for it to happen. And yeah, absolutely.
Agreed. Okay, so yes, and again, I think we could, and I'll definitely be inviting you back on in the future, because I feel like we're just, it's like we're exactly, and it's like we're not even the tip of the iceberg. We're like not even half of like a snowflake on the tip of the ice. So anyway, shifting over to your website here, I've got it pulled up. If someone is curious about PauseOS, or let's just say they want to dive right in, walk me through your website here. What do people need to know? What information is available there? I see, we've got a shop aspect of it. So, maybe give us a rundown.
Perfect. So I think this part for me is a work in progress. Like I sort of did the opposite approach of like, instead of having an idea and then doing a Kickstarter and then going through like a process of that might be more normal and perhaps effective, I went and built the phone first. Right?
Okay.
This thing, I use it every day. I love it. It's not like some idea that is like a potential thing to exist. It already exists. And so that being said, the website has been sort of an afterthought that I've been putting together as I go.
Gotcha.
So it is very much a work in progress. What you're looking at right now is the blog, where I also wanted to start to sort of have some conversations about some of this, some of the things that we're talking about. Like there's an article there, for example, that says, why a two-factor authentication app belongs on the distraction-free phone, right? Like some of the reasons that people might not be able to use a light phone at this point is like, well, they need a two-factor authentication app maybe for the work or something like that, right? So that's something that we have as part of a beautiful open source project that was available, or talking about some media. There's a movie called Megan, which I thought was really interesting, about someone living with an AI toy and this sort of emotional attachment that people have with technology. And,
oh man.
yeah,
yes.
It's deep. And so I wanted to sort of have a way to do that. The Learn More section I put together, which was really just to try to give people as much detail as possible of like what they're getting and what to expect. Right now it's kind of word heavy and, definitely could use sort of a refreshment in terms of just making it easier to access and search through this stuff. And right now the store, like I'll try to get this live before this podcast or before this YouTube video goes up. Just let me know when it's going to be published. Right now the shop is like under construction essentially. So you'll see like
so the actual so the web shop.
Yes. Okay. But we can talk about it, which is essentially that right now I'm not even upcharging for the device itself. I'm building this. I wanted modern hardware that was, you're getting a good camera, you're getting solid hardware that gets support well into the future. And so literally I'm looking at it as the operating system is free. and you're just paying the retail price for, in this case, a Pixel 8. I'm building it right now for Pixel 9 as well. We've kind of discussed that off screen.
Yes, we
have. So my intention at this point is I'm not looking to upcharge. I'm just looking to get this into the hands of people that want good hardware and they're willing to just pay the retail price. So you can email me if you wanted to right now. hello@notasmartphone.com, which is also my domain.
Okay.
If you watch this and you're like, you know what, I want to support this project, I'd love to buy one of these from this guy, and you can email me there, and I can set up an invoice and that sort of thing. But likely also I'll have some links available. Hopefully that if you go to the shop, you can actually purchase this before it goes live.
Okay. And is this that begs a good question, and I think we've talked about this. I just don't remember the answer. Are you using refurbished or brand new devices for this?
Great question. So right now, brand new. I'm kind of a guy like I just want to buy it new if I can. Nothing against I love the sort of refurbished nature and keeping devices like active over time, and I think that's really important. And I think starting with the Pixel 8, that'll be supported for a really long time. Eventually, that'll become an older phone, and we'll still offer that. It's just the price will decrease over time, right? And then that will be and if people would prefer a refurbished device, we could offer that too. Again, at maybe a lower price, and maybe people prefer that. I'm finding, to me, that's kind of an interesting thing. Is there are actually people who prefer a refurbished device, and so that's why the feedback and everything is great, and this is why this is an open dialogue. So I'm absolutely open to that as well, and maybe I'll try to put some options for refurbished devices up as well. And then I thought about doing a service where it was a mail-in service where if you already had a Pixel 8, you could send it in. We will put the operating system on there for you and send it back to you. So
okay. So if people aren't super comfortable with ADB or whatever they would need to do it themselves, you can just say, hey, yeah, send it to us, we'll do it, and send it back.
Exactly. They have the phone, they bought it already, whatever, and then they want to try this out. I'm absolutely open to doing that for folks as well.
Cool. Well, Jonathan, I feel like we could just keep talking and talking and talking, but folks, this has been a wonderful discussion. I'm super, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on. We will keep this conversation going. I will put links to all of your stuff and anything else that we've talked about here, if I can remember to, in the show notes. But yes, Jonathan, any sort of parting thoughts, anything else that you maybe didn't get to convey that you would like to?
I was just super happy to talk with you. I feel like you said, we could talk about this for hours. Maybe we should, I'm happy to do another episode or our podcast format, because there's just so much to discuss in this space. And I'm just really excited to be, a part of the solution, really. And so thank you for talking to me and be able to express some of that. And yeah, just excited, man. If you're out there, you're listening to this, just try this stuff out. This is a lifestyle. This is not just about one device. Right now, we really talked mostly about the phone, but I've also put this on a tablet, and also looking at other devices in my house, including the computer, to make that as distraction free as possible. And because I feel like I want to build a future where the tech supports us and doesn't just try to consume our time and attention and distract us. So yeah, maybe we can talk about that more later, but thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Folks, thanks for tuning in. If you are new here, we have a Reddit page, reddit.com/r/returning retro. Glad to have you on the adventure with us. But yeah, really the goal is to sort of bring the community together between those out there making solutions like Jonathan here with PauseOS, those of us sort of reporting on them like Returning Retro, bringing people together, and then also obviously the all-important end users, those that are just in the community finding their way as well. We're there's strength in numbers, we'll put it that way. So thanks again to Jonathan, and we'll see everyone in the next one.